and welcome back to another episode of the greatest show in the galaxy, the show where I, the curator, discuss my personal favorite show of all time, personal favorite franchise of all time, Doctor Who. And today we will be continuing and, for all intents and purposes, ending what I like to call Sea Devil Month, the month where we talk all about the Sea Devils. And as you may have seen from the thumbnail, we are going to be covering a comic book for the first time ever on this show. However, as I usually like to go on to do on this year's show, I like to start every single episode with a highlight of birthdays. Now, after a week or two of not finding any significant birthdays of any people associated with Doctor Who on any of the main sources I go to, I just decided to go right to the source, and I have a bunch of ones to highlight for now, and I will be continuing to do so for the time being. So I just wanted to point that out. So that will explain why there are just such a huge number of birthdays this week and the preceding weeks going forward. Now, in no particular order, the first person we are going to be highlighting today is a man by the name of Michael Spice. You may not be familiar with him, at least not from this picture, but Michael Spice played the voice of the character Morbius in the Doctor Who episode The Brain of Morbius, as well as playing the title character of the infamously controversial episode The Talons of Weng Chiang, playing Weng Chiang. Obviously, he was born on May 20th, 1931, and he sadly passed away Wednesday, November 2nd, on 1983. He was 53 when he passed away. Next, we have, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name, Eleanor Tomlinson. I think I did a better job than I thought I would pronouncing that name. She played the character Eve in The Mad Woman in the Attic on the Sarah Jane episode. She was born May 19th, 1992. She is 30 years old at the moment. The next person I'd like to highlight is a woman by the name of Joanne Mary Joyner. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name. She played the character Linda Moss in the episodes Bad Wolf and The Parting of the Ways. Next, we have the... clearly, I need better practice with this. Lily Cole. She played the Siren in the Matt Smith episode The Curse of the Black Spot. She was born May 19th, 1988, and she is 34 this week. Next, we have Miriam Margolis. She, again, from the Sarah Jane Adventures, she played the character of Leaf the Blatherine in the episode The Gift. She was credited for voice only. Next, we have Corey Johnson. For those of you who don't know, he played the character of Henry Van Stanton in the Christopher Eccleston episode Dalek. He was born May 17th, 1961, and he is 61 this week, which actually kind of fits. Next, we have Juliet Cowan. I apologize again if I'm mispronouncing the name. She played Christy Jackson in the first season of the Sarah Jane Adventures, as well as the first episode of season 2. She was born Tuesday, May 21st, and she's 48 right now. And finally, we have Don Warrington. For those of you who don't know, he played Rassilon on various different Big Finish episodes, including but not limited to Neverland and its sort of spiritual sequel, as well as the 40th anniversary special, Zagreus. And he also, as seen in this picture in particular, played the president of the president of Great Britain in the episode Rise of the Cybermen and the Age of Steel. Technically, he's credited for the Age of Steel, despite not actually appearing in that episode entirely. So, yeah, this was the new, as I like to call it, the new birthday section of this show, and yeah, it was a bit messy and wonky, and I kind of did that last minute. It was a last minute addition to this episode. Next episode, hopefully, it won't look as clunky as it did right now. Now, moving on to the actual topic of today's episode, like I said previously, we are going to be discussing the Sea Devils. As seen in this picture, we talked about the Sea Devils in the classic era of the show, with this episode in particular, the Sea Devils, where they made their debut alongside the Third Doctor. We talked about Legend of the Sea Devils, their most recent appearance on the show, as well as the most recent episode of the show. We sort of took a bit of a sidestep to talk about the announcement of Ncuti Gatwa as the 14th Doctor, as well as discussing some various other Doctor Who news that have dropped almost around the same time. Now we're back on track with the Sea Devils, and this is going to be our first coverage of a comic book on this show, specifically a comic book called Alternating Current, which sees the 13th Doctor and the 10th Doctor encountering Sea Devils, which I think is actually very fitting, since the 10th Doctor didn't actually get a chance to meet any Sea Devils on screen during his run, as well as his return in the Day of the Doctor. Curiously, he also didn't get a chance to have an on-screen meeting with the Silurians, which were reintroduced into the show during the Matt Smith era. So yeah, I have read this comic book twice now. At the moment, I read it first just to experience it for the first time. I read it again to prepare for last week's show, and then all the news of Ncuti Gatwa happened, and I kind of had to force myself to course correct. Didn't really have time to read the comic book a third time, but I will try to break down the story as well as I can, as best I can. Now, once again, I said this for my breakdown of the Sea Devils episode, as well as for Legend of the Sea Devils. There's a clear distinction there, but I said this during both those episodes of this show. I'm not going to give you a full breakdown, panel by panel, dialogue bubble by dialogue bubble. I'm just going to give you a basic overview of the main synopsis of the story, in the hopes that it will entice you to check out the comic book for yourself. I will not be talking about every single individual detail and every single minute point that happens during the story. All I'm going to do is just discuss the overall story from all the major scenes and plot points, and just try to put it in as much of a cohesive story as I possibly can. And I will also be using pictures to help myself in this mission, which actually ended up helping me a lot more than the ones where I did for the episode breakdowns, because now I actually have them in full order. That will actually help me keep the pacing of the story, as it were, much more on point. Now, we start with, obviously, issue 1 of the comic book story Alternating Current, which sees the 13th Doctor, after narrowly avoiding a potentially universe-ending paradox of meeting a previous version of herself, narrowly avoiding that, landing in a alternate version of London. Now, I suppose I should take this time to point out that this actually does pick up from a completely different comic book story where the 13th Doctor met another version of herself, but it's not really the story we're covering today, so I just wanted to point that out. That's like a sort of a prologue to this story. Anyways, the 13th Doctor and her fam land in London town, which as you can see here in this picture, is completely destroyed and devastated by some mysterious and at the moment unknown force. The 13th Doctor and her fan decide to start investigating the remains of this new ghost town of London, and making a note to point out that the architecture appears to be a sort of a mishmash of old 1800s, or rather late 1800s, early 1900s London, with a slight mix of the more modern London that they were familiar with. During their patrol throughout the seemingly empty city, they reach a patrol of sea devils, and they immediately decide to hide uh, while the Doctor tries to figure out a plan of what to do next. At this point, the story then cuts to a separate scene in a different part of the city, where we see a group of rebels attacking a Sea Devil base. Several of the human resistance fighters get killed during the assault, but their leader is determined that they should keep up the fight and eventually end this ruthless oppression by the Sea Devils. And in the following page, their fearless leader is then revealed to be none other than Rose Tyler. More on her later. Meanwhile, back to the Doctor and her friends, she immediately walks up to the Sea Devils and presents her psychic paper, when the Sea Devils, in a very Nazi-type move, immediately ask for her papers. She presents them her psychic paper, which reveals that she's actually a human Sea Devil liaison. I suppose at this point I should probably point out that once again the Sea Devils technically don't call themselves Sea Devils. That's more or less a name given to them by a horror-struck seaman during the original Sea Devil episode, but the name kind of stuck. So I'm going to continue to refer to them as Sea Devils, and for the purposes of this story, we're going to assume that they actually call themselves Sea Devils. That they're more, even in their debut episode, the 13th Doctor does make a reference that they're actually a different version of Silurians, and even that name in and of itself is partially incorrect, because the Silurian age was much earlier than when the Silurian creatures lived. They're more Eocene. But these kinds of inconsistencies just happen from time to time, and we're just going to have to accept that. So back to the main story, the 13th Doctor then presents herself and her friends as human Sea Devil liaison, a fib that really doesn't hold up for the Sea Devils initially. The Sea Devils then decide, arrest the Doctor and her friends and take her to a sort of refugee camp that was kind of made from a makeshift school by the looks of it. At least I'm assuming it's a school. Once there, the Doctor and friends encounter a mysterious couple who seems to be quite on top of things inside the refugee camp. That couple is none other than Pete Tyler and his wife Jackie, Rose's parents, obviously. Speaking of Rose, the story then cuts back to Rose herself, back in her human resistance headquarters, where she looks at a picture of herself with her parents during much happier days, where she then makes a promise that things will be different one day, and that her fight against the Sea Devil oppression will result in the freedom of all mankind. Her emotional moment of nostalgia with her parents is immediately interrupted by the arrival of a blue box, which obviously we the readers can recognize as the TARDIS. Rose immediately grabs her gun and proceeds to threaten whoever is inside this mysterious police box that just happened to land in her base, which is then revealed to be the 10th Doctor, who is actually surprised at the fact that Rose Tyler doesn't seem to recognize him in the slightest. And as you can see there by the to be continued sign at the bottom of the page there, that was the end of the first issue. Now, issue two goes back to the 10th Doctor and Rose in her base, where the Doctor finds it curious that she doesn't remember him at all. Well, and he tries to convince her that in another time, in another lifetime, in fact, they actually knew each other and were very, very close. This picture goes back to the 13th Doctor. Okay, so there was actually a separate panel here that I guess I forgot to upload, but it actually shows the 10th Doctor showing a bit of an interest in the picture that we just mentioned a minute ago, the one that Rose was talking to, which the 10th Doctor very sharply points out that this seems to be a picture taken from a happier time, a time without the Sea Devils, which actually contradicts what we know of the story itself, because from what Rose is saying, the Sea Devils have been around since before her parents were born, so logically there's no way that this picture could have been taken properly, at least not the way that it did in the picture itself. And obviously, given the fact that Pete was still alive while Rose was in her late teens, early 20s, this would also suggest a bit of a broken timeline, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff. So, yeah, I don't know why I decided to go on that tangent, but it's a part of the story, so I mentioned it anyway. The Doctor then tries his best to try and convince this alternate Rose Tyler to join him in the TARDIS and hopefully try to save the people in the refugee camps, her parents included, and try to stop whatever the Sea Devils have planned and reverse reverse this alternate timeline created by the Sea Devils. Meanwhile, back in the refugee camp, the Doctor then proceeds to explain to her friends exactly who Pete and Jackie Tyler are. She also tells them about Rose, and going back to what I said earlier, she does mention that Pete Tyler died when Rose Tyler was very, very young. So him being alive is the main indication that this isn't the London that they know. It's an alternate timeline that seems to have happened as a result of something going wrong in the past. The Doctor then goes on to explain a little bit more about the ultimate fate of Pete Tyler and Jackie Tyler, that they were eventually reunited with different versions from separate universes, landing on an alternate universe, which the Doctor in the episode Doomsday mentions being Pete's world. She also then goes on to explain that Rose had a sort of happy ending, while the 10th Doctor was forced to leave her behind with the Meta-Crisis Doctor. This sad trip down memory lane is immediately interrupted with an explosion in the refugee camp, which shocks not only the walls themselves, but everyone inside the camp. It was quickly revealed that the one responsible for this explosion is none other than the Scythra Queen, an alien species that by this point in the story, the 13th Doctor and her friends have already encountered once before. However, this Scythra Queen isn't at all like the Scythra Queen that they previously encountered in the episode Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. This Scythra Queen is actually a good queen. She's actually a human sympathizer who's actually fighting against the oppression of the Sea Devils and helping to free the humans in the refugee camps, even going so far as ordering her own soldiers to jump into the line of fire into the Sea Devils' line of fire to shield the humans with their bodies, essentially dying in order to protect the human refugees that she's helping to escape, which the 13th Doctor then declares is unacceptable. She then uses her sonic screwdriver to disable the Sea Devils' weapons, rendering them useless in order to allow the Doctor and friends, as well as the Skithra Queen, to make a quick escape. Meanwhile, in the Human Resistance headquarters, after a lengthy conversation between the 10th Doctor and alternate universe Rose, the Doctor finally manages to convince Rose to join him in the TARDIS and try to find a way of saving her parents. However, this Rose being an alternate version, she does that while also taking her gun with him. Sorry, with her. Much to the Doctor's dismay, as we know, the tenth Doctor in particular, really doesn't like guns. Least of all used by Rose Tyler herself. Least of all in the TARDIS, and even the TARDIS herself really doesn't like the idea of a gun being inside her own console room. Back to the 13th Doctor. In the meantime, the 13th Doctor and friends say their goodbye to Pete and Jackie Tyler and wish them and bid them farewell and wish them good fortune on the rest of their journey. The 13th Doctor then proceeds to converse with the Skithra Queen, which reveals to her that she's very much unlike any other Skithra Queen. Skithra, as seen in the episode Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, are mainly known as ruthless scavengers who would very much rip an entire world apart just for their technologies and weapons, so that they can move on to the next world, where they can pillage for any scrap of technology they can find. This Skithra Queen this specific Skithra Queen, on the other hand, actually likes humans, and she actually actively goes against the rest of her species. The 13th Doctor then makes friends with the Skithra Queen and begins to question her about how about the history of her race's involvement with the Sea Devils. She then tries to figure out how the Sea Devils actually rose to prominence in planet Earth in the 20th and 21st century. The Skithra Queen then reveals that the Sea Devils actually rose to prominence as a result of Skithra interference, which the Doctor then immediately deduces that this actually has something to do with the kidnapping of Nikola Tesla. As revealed by the Skithra Queen, it is quickly revealed that this is actually in an alternate universe where the Skithra plan from Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror was actually successful. The Skithra not only managed to capture and kidnap Nikola Tesla himself, but Thomas Edison as well. The 13th Doctor then goes back into the TARDIS with the Skithra Queen and immediately sets her coordinates back to the early 20th century, where they originally met Nikola Tesla in the aforementioned episode. Unfortunately, at that moment, the TARDIS starts to act up, and there's some huge mess happening, not just inside the 13th Doctor's TARDIS, but the 10th Doctor's TARDIS as well. Both Doctors begin to sense that, and both Doctors' TARDISes begin to sense a potential collision between two alternating timelines in a paradox timeline, which, if you know anything about paradoxes and alternate timelines, really isn't good. And this is more or less how the second issue ends. And thus begins the third issue of Alternating Current, which begins with the 13th Doctor coming up with an idea to somehow stop this temporal collision while also saving Nikola Tesla and putting the main timeline back on course, all at the same time. She then sends a message to her previous self, the 10th Doctor, which results in both TARDISes merging together, sending the 10th Doctor and alternate universe Rose Tyler into the 13th Doctor's TARDIS alongside the Doctor, Yaz, Ryan, Graham, and the Skithra Queen. With all these different characters from these two different timelines in the Paradox timeline reunited, the 10th Doctor then proceeds to admire the Skithra Queen, initially believing her to be his future incarnation, but then that bit of excitement is then cut short when the 13th Doctor herself introduces herself as the proper future incarnation of the 10th Doctor. The two Doctors then catch each other up to speed on the situation, explaining who the alternate Rose Tyler is, and who the Skithra Queen is, and how this whole mess started to begin with. During that time, though, Rose unfortunately notices that her gun has disappeared, presumably left behind in the 10th Doctor's TARDIS, because even the TARDIS refused to bring a weapon from the 10th Doctor's past into the 13th Doctor's present. So Rose is effectively weaponless at this point in the story. The two Doctors and their friends eventually land in 1903's New York City, the site of where the Skithra allegedly kidnapped Thomas Edison in the Paradox timeline. The 10th Doctor is incredibly excited and giddy over the fact of potentially meeting Nikola Tesla for the first time, but this is effectively old news for the 13th Doctor at this point. As the group of time travelers walk the street heading towards Nikola Tesla's laboratory, the Skithra Queen gets called out as a monster and a demon by random people on the street, which causes Rose Tyler to take off her war-torn jacket and hand it over to the Skithra Queen to hide her features, which actually shows a bit of compassion by this alternate universe Rose Tyler to an alien life form, which actually goes to show us that regardless of the origin story or the upbringing, Rose Tyler is still Rose Tyler, the loving and compassionate character we have learned to love on the original show. The Doctor and friends then go back to Nikola Tesla's laboratory to find the character from the original episode that I'm blanking on the name at the moment. Sad over the fact that Nikola Tesla has been kidnapped and the police refuses to do anything, which leads the 13th Doctor to surmise that they've landed a bit too late. The Skithra have already completed their mission by kidnapping Tesla, as well as Thomas Edison in the process. The 13th Doctor then promises the woman that they will bring Tesla back, whether and she has nothing to worry about before all of them go back to the 13th Doctor's TARDIS and land in a different location in that very same timeline. Sorry, in that very same time period, a site where the Sea Devils have previously caused a riot in a completely different comic book run, Once Upon a Time, which we will not be discussing at the moment. There's a bit of a emotional moment between the 13th Doctor and alternate Rose Tyler, who seems to be lamenting the fact that once they fix the alternate timeline and the Sea Devils never actually conquered Earth, everything that she knew, everything that she is, will be deleted from history, effectively meaning that she never will have existed. The 13th Doctor then makes a promise that he would try to fix that by finding a place for her to coexist. The two Doctors and their friends then go back to the 13th Doctor's TARDIS to try and find the site of a Skithra experiment that specifically uses Nikola Tesla's brilliance in order to function. The Skithra Queen then walks up to two disguised Skithra soldiers, trying to convince them that she's the proper queen and that they should withdraw whatever it is that they're doing and bring Nikola Tesla back to planet Earth. Unfortunately for her, the two Skithra soldiers can immediately tell that she is not the real queen, because apparently every Skithra soldier is connected to the queen that spawned them, in a sense. So this being a queen from an alternate universe in the future, they immediately recognize her as not being their original queen. The two Skithra then shed their human-like appearance and begin to attack the queen, which then prompts Rose to take the initiative and throw a rock at one of them, distracting them, which gives the Skithra queen some time to go for the kill, essentially killing um, both of the two Skithras, much to the 13th Doctor's anger over the fact that uh, this needless and pointless killing just took place right in front of her. The Skithra queen tries to brush this whole incident aside by telling the Doctor that those two were the casualties of war, and tries to teach the 13th Doctor about war. To which the 13th Doctor then replies by saying that she knows more about war than she could ever possibly imagine in her darkest nightmares, which was I thought was a very cool moment from the 13th Doctor. Anyways, the two Doctors and their TARDIS crews then immediately go back to the 13th Doctor's TARDIS to try and go and find the Skithra's mothership and save Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. And that was the end of the third issue of Alternating Current. The fourth issue actually opens up with this really cool, badass variant cover of Alternate Universe Rose Tyler, which I just think is really awesome and badass, and decided to put on the screen for no particular reason other than the fact that I really, really like this variant cover. Anyways, in the 13th Doctor's TARDIS, the crew then devise a plan to land on the main Skithra's flagship, or mothership, I should say, and use the Queen to activate the ship's self-destruct right after they save Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, in order to prevent the Skithra from trying to do this again, as well as preserving the main timeline. There's a moment there where Rose asks the 13th Doctor if and she actually has any weapons on her TARDIS, to which the 10th Doctor initially dislikes this new side of Rose Tyler, but almost given the fact that the 13th Doctor avoided answering the question, he initially believes starts to think the worst of her, that she actually did install weapons on her TARDIS, to which the 13th Doctor then reassures him, saying that he of all people should know better. Again, I just really like the interaction between two individual Doctors in the same story. I just really felt the need to point that out. Anyways, the 13th Doctor's TARDIS lands on the Skithra mothership, and then the Doctors then decide to split up. The 10th Doctor, Rose, Yaz, Graham, and Ryan would go and free Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, while the 13th Doctor and the Queen, which she affectionately calls Queenie, will go and find the self-destruct mechanism. She then warns the 10th Doctor to be very, very careful as to not die before he could regenerate into her, because they already have one paradox happening around the universe. They really don't want to add another one right on top of it, potentially an even worse one. While the 10th Doctor takes the 13th Doctor's advice to heart, being unusually cautious as to not get himself killed on board Skithra's mothership, Rose once again takes the initiative and actually rushes forward in the attempt to locate Tesla and Edison, who are being held captive and being forced to work on a new advanced technologies for the Skithra. The 10th Doctor then uses his sonic screwdriver to unshackle the two scientists and free them so that they can actually make a run for the 13th Doctor's TARDIS once again. The 13th Doctor and the Queen, or Queenie as she calls her, eventually manage to find the ship's core, which the Queen sends into overload, which will eventually send the mothership to self-destruct. But as they try to find their way back to the TARDIS, the 13th Doctor is then immediately attacked by the original Skithra Queen from that particular episode, the original Queen from that point in time. The future Queen, the Good Queen, or Queenie, then tells the Doctor to run while she keeps the eviler Queen, or the past Queen, at bay with a potential fight to the death. The 13th Doctor initially resents this idea, saying that she doesn't have to die for her species crimes, but the Queen, the Good Queen, eventually convinces the 13th Doctor that this is her way of doing something good for the universe, sacrificing herself in the spaceship that's about to explode in order to preserve the timeline and save all of humanity, which she believed her species has wronged in the past. The 13th Doctor then reluctantly leaves the Queen behind and makes a run for back to her TARDIS, which she eventually managed to catch up to the 10th Doctor and the scientists. And while the two scientists are baffled by the transdimensional engineering of the TARDIS itself, the 13th Doctor then immediately rushes back to her console and is able to take off from the exploding spaceship with just enough time to save the TARDIS and bring the two scientists back to Earth, New York City, 1903. Meanwhile, the 10th Doctor tries to distract the two scientists by asking them some random questions about electricity to make sure that they don't focus too much on the TARDIS's internal dimensions. So the 10th Doctor then escorts Tesla and Edison back outside the TARDIS and bids them farewell, at least until he will eventually meet them for himself when he will eventually become the 13th Doctor. The two TARDISes then separate, and the two Doctors then go their separate ways. The 10th Doctor then takes Rose to what would have been her original timeline, but a sort of fixed timeline where the Sea Devils never actually rose to prominence, and humanity was never subjugated, and her parents were never forced to live, I should say, in refugee camps. For some reason, Rose just seems unable to accept this new reality, this new world, where humanity isn't fighting for survival against the Sea Devils, claiming that with the human race living in peace now, she has no reason to exist, and she's really upset about that. So the 10th Doctor then suggests to Rose that he can just take her in the TARDIS to various other worlds where she can eventually fight for freedom on those worlds to fulfill what she believes is her purpose in life. In the meanwhile, I should say, the 13th Doctor then lands in a completely different area of this new fixed timeline where the Sea Devils never actually rose to prominence. Noticing that all was well and the timeline was fixed. Unfortunately, this is immediately cut short by the 13th Doctor feeling a bit of a blip in the timelines, which is personified in this particular panel with the 13th Doctor sneezing, because apparently the Time Lords, or specifically the Doctor, can sense fluctuations in the timelines by sneezing. I guess that's a thing now. In any case, the 13th Doctor then tells her friends to stay behind, while she immediately goes back into her own TARDIS and tries to fix that. Which, at this point, I should probably point out that this directly ties in to the Time Lord Victoria storyline, which was actually happening in the comics alongside this specific storyline. The 13th Doctor then goes back in her own personal timeline and meets a separate version of the 10th Doctor that seemingly has no idea who she is. It's not really clear if it's the same 10th Doctor from this storyline or if it's a different 10th Doctor from another timeline. I don't know. Doctor Who timelines get confusing sometimes. All you really need to know is that at the very end of this story, the 13th Doctor goes back in time and meets a different version of the 10th Doctor, which is a slightly different but same version of the 10th Doctor from this story. In the meantime, in any case, the 13th Doctor, after solving whatever problem that was, goes back several hours after she left to go and pick up Yaz, Ryan, and Graham, where she's greeted by none other than the Corsair, a famous notable Time Lord, which was famously referenced in the Neil Gaiman story, The Doctor's Wife. And that was the end of this particular comic book run, as seen over here at the bottom of the screen. The 13th Doctor and the Corsair will return soon, in presumably another comic book story, but that is a story for another time. Once again, I humbly ask that you try to forgive my very basic and sort of sloppy storytelling method. Again, I had this whole thing ready to go last week, and well, some stuff happened, and I was kind of forced to put this whole episode on hold for one more week to talk about the Shuki Gakwa thing and the return of David Tennant and Catherine Tate and Bernard Cribbins, as well as the casting of Yasmin Finney, which at at the time of this recording has been already confirmed to be Donna Noble's daughter. So there was a lot of things that happened in between last week and this week. So I kind of forgot some of the minutia of the story. I did actually. I did read specifically the comic for a second time. Fully prepared. I was fully prepared to record this story last week, but once again, life got in the way, and all I can say at the moment is this right now. It's weird how this whole month has been kind of littered with problems of this nature as I try to talk about the Sea Devils. Obviously, we will remember when the original episode that I recorded for the first Sea Devils appearance got deleted, and I had to redo the entire episode. This whole month has been kind of a mess, but thankfully it's over, and hopefully, next week I'm going to have a much better and much more coherent show, as I'm planning to do round 2 of the Doctor Who quotes game. I'm actually finalizing the list of competitors for that game, but that's for next week at the moment. So that's really all I can say for today's episode. If you like this episode, and if you actually like to check out some of the other shows we have on this channel, we have so many other shows on this channel. We have Northern Countdown, where I and two of my friends, Ben Rayner and Soda, rank our top 5 favorite stuff from movies to TV shows to stuff from movies and TV shows, and we go over video games, music, uh, characters, people from history, all sorts of cool and fun stuff. So go ahead and check that out. Ben and Sora can also be found on a show called Rewind the Tape, where they go over a specific movie franchise, movie by movie. I believe now they've already started what. Speaking of Doctor Who, what in my I technically consider to be one of the better start to finish time traveling stories of all time, Back to the Future. So go ahead and check that out. Soda can also be found on another show on this channel called The Squared Slice, where he talks about wrestling. We also have another show on this channel called Have You Seen This? With Daniel and Snark, where they talk about other TV shows that aren't Doctor Who, so they're lesser, in my opinion. Ben can also be found on his channel, The Multiverse of Geekdom. He has a show called Unwind. He has a show called Jedi Academy, where they talk mainly about Star Wars. Dissecting Schmodown, where they talk mainly about Schmodown for obvious reasons, and all kinds of fun stuff over there. You can also check out my good friend Taco on his channel, Something to Talk About, as well as another one of our good friends, Jess the Kiwi, on her channel, Kiwi Jess. And you can also check out my channel, 50 Shades of Geek. That is really all I can say for now. And yep, this brings an end to our Sea Devil month. And hopefully I'll see all your smiling faces next week on the second edition of Doctor Who Said It. Is my quotes game. So until next week's episode, Alon Z.